Be doing a quick one and just really giving out some gratitude to the Bitcoin community and just giving you the highlights of the Bitcoin 2022 conference that I saw watching it on the side and having tweets and messages from many of the people involved. In what a historical moment it was. It was 11 years ago that I spoke at my very first Bitcoin conference in 2011. We could barely put together 50 people, and the Bitcoin 2022 conference by Bitcoin Magazine had, some people said, between price being in a bit of a downward motion throughout the conference, which is just an incredible achievement of how important this organic, freedom-creating, social economic experiment called creating digital, hard, sound money for any individual, any company, and any country to use. I've been to spoken at many Bitcoin conferences since. I remember the 2013 one, the 2014 one in Amsterdam, when the first big companies and miners were sponsoring it, and they had their big banners, and we couldn't believe our industry had grown enough to be able to afford a big banner, through to Bitcoin 2022. Shout out to David Bailey and Tyler. You guys have come along massively since Bitcoin Magazine, one of the earliest OGs in the industry as well. So really happy to see the Bitcoin 2022. I just wanted to give you a few highlights in case you didn't have time to watch it. It was a marathon. They streamed the whole thing live on YouTube. But here were some of the real highlights for me, for those of you that are too busy to go through it. And if you want to go through some of it, I'm going to give you my top three to review that are all available on YouTube, hopefully. I know they had a bit of censorship. The channel got taken down by algorithms, but then they got it back up. And the power that Bitcoin have to give them freedom. So those of you that are always analyzing Bitcoin from a price perspective and what it does for your country where you have a good degree of freedom, it's really worth putting in perspective and having a bit of gratitude for what actual privileges we do have. Even though we live in a country where we're trying to make big changes, we're trying to achieve more financial freedom, we may have bipartisan, almost internal, leading to civil wars, who knows? But the level of freedoms that some of us have relative to others is always worth considering and contrasting your situation to, in order to have more gratitude that you're even in the ability to make a difference in the world and consume such content. It went through an account of escaping North Korea and sex slaves and human trafficking that happens as a result of having no financial inclusion and arriving at countries with no financial resources, no bank accounts, and the possibilities of transporting out of regimes such as North Korea, which is an isolated regime that is completely isolated from the rest of the world, and the power of brain wallets of being able to transport your value. Yeah, really struggling with the internet today, not sure how or where that cut off, but you can download that into being able to access your Bitcoin on the other side of the border, giving more freedom and possibility for refugees and those that want to escape regimes and avoid atrocities like human trafficking and on the other side. There was also an account of what happens when your currency is controlled by some European colonial force and the powers that they has over the individual people living in those African countries, which was really worth talking. I'm not giving the details because I think you should go and watch it. And also an account of the opportunities for those Palestinians that are currently in conflict with Israel, and the opportunities that it gives them to make a difference in their country. So individual freedom as a result of the financial inclusion and the financial education possibilities that Bitcoin brings about it. Really inspiring for me to see that Bitcoin can have this impact that we all knew it could have. And now we need to do a lot more work on the humanitarian and human rights movements and support them in what difference people can make using money that has the ability for you to own it despite the fact of what your bank is doing, the ability for you to transact despite how corrupt your government may be, and the ability to store your value in digital hard sound money. And anybody that hasn't realized the impact that Bitcoin can have, and you're crying out for it to be banned in your country to support your agenda, then really look at what the impact it can have on other people's agendas, because Bitcoin is more than your personal agenda in your country. The second thing is Bitcoin for companies. Bitcoin for companies. Now with Bitcoin for companies, I check out Jack Mallers' presentation. He did a great job of unpacking the opportunities that have been working on thanks to Lightning Network. Lightning Network adoption was a huge theme of the conference, and the ability to use Bitcoin for cheaper, faster payments. You get a bit of a security trade-off and a privacy consideration when using Lightning Network, but the opportunities for the second layer and where it is right now. Jack Mallers was announcing some of the integrations that are happening with different players in the ecosystem, when now merchant processors, he went through an awesome history of payments, similar to in my book, Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust, where I went through how the payment system evolved from Bank of America through to Citibank and everything in between. He gave a brilliant presentation explaining merchant processing and how those fees are incurred just by owning the payment rails within these banks and financial institutions. He did a great presentation as well, a little bit of American supremacy, USA, but we'll forgive Jack. I believe that patriotism is glorified racism, but at the same time, I understand why people look to support their countries as well. But anyway, and also the way that this is working is that people can now have a fiat currency. It can go via the Lightning Network in order to convert at completely low charges and then back to fiat currency so that there's no taxable event in between depending on your tax jurisdiction. So now this is going to be, you're going to be able to use Bitcoin and Lightning at pretty much every merchant processor in the United States. I think it had about 80% coverage. Whether you want to put food atrocities like McDonald's in you and everything else in between, and Walmart's and all the major brands in the world that have point of sale terminals. So in terms of corporations, look forward to a future with very small merchant processing fees, thanks to Bitcoin's Lightning Network and the adoption it's starting to have. At the third stage as well is Bitcoin for countries. So if you want to understand some of the things that are brewing since the epic El Salvador announcement at the 2021 Bitcoin conference, Samson Mao, my good friend, was out there and sharing some of the work that he's been doing. And Bitcoin giving more freedom for countries to promote and really bring in all of the brains, intelligence, energy, entrepreneurship, and freedom-loving community that are all on a mission to provide more financial freedom for individuals, companies, and countries. So check out those three presentations if you haven't. Those are some of the highlights. I didn't want to spoil them, but always remember you are alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. Some are going to get really hurt that aren't watching these channels or the Bitcoin 2022 conference. Others are going to do really well, and I want to make sure that more people have subscribed to. Peace.